So for those of you who are watching or listening, I'm James Singleton, founder of Insightful Voice. And as you know, I am doing a Your IB video series talking to coaches and thought leaders from around the country about specific topics. And this series is focusing on failure, as we mentioned before. But before I go further, I want to give you a little introduction about who Bryan Blakeny, who's the other person on the other side of this conversation, is. Bryan is from Houston and has been a licensed clinical social worker for nearly 15 years. And from a young age, he has been fascinated by the challenges which face humanity and the opportunities for creating lasting peace and happiness in society. His work is centered on the belief that people are more successful when focus is put on understanding processes rather than just on a specific dilemma or issue. His work also exemplifies values that include the oneness of humanity, equality of women and men, and walking the spiritual path with practical feet. I love that. And understanding the importance of kindness and other virtues. In addition to clinical training at the master's level, he has completed 3,000 hours. That is right, 3,000 hours of clinical experience. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'd really like to talk to you, as I said, about failure. And so the first question that I wanted to ask you is, why do you feel people are so afraid to fail?
Well, it's, I think, the universal question, but ultimately, obviously, we have a fear of inadequacy and of being targeted as perhaps incompetent. And so, and obviously with that comes the feeling of rejection and maybe even, God forbid, feeling despised. Yeah. And all this ultimately leads to the fear, the imaginary fear that we might somehow be left alone. Because we are such social creatures. We truly depend on one another. And I think the greatest hell would be to just have to live an entire lifetime just by ourselves. Oftentimes people that are isolated for years on end, in some cases, they can literally develop, schizophrenia and all kinds of mental issues because of that isolation. So I think that's kind of the first element of that fear. And that it's important to mention that it is based in fear itself is largely based in our imagination.
That is so.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that is so interesting. I've never heard it put that way. Of that the bottom, the very core of being afraid to fail is linked to not wanting to be alone. If failing would connect to being alone or feeling like you're the only one going through something. That is really interesting. So, yeah. Thinking back to a situation where you failed, what do you wish you could have done differently, and what did you ultimately learn?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess in that process, too many failures to list here today. But years ago, I was in a private practice with some of the other therapists, and I was the youngest one of them at the time. And they thought they wanted to keep kind of everything in-house. And one of those things they wanted to keep in-house was the billing process, which I really didn't have much experience. But they entrusted me with that and thought that, I was a quick study and could take that on. And to make a long story short, it ended up being an absolute nightmare. The learning curve was far greater than I anticipated. And things really went really soured with that learning curve. It was pretty devastating for all of us. And so, what have I learned from it? Well, I guess the main thing is that, when we aren't up to speed with something and there's a particular amount of pressure on us, it's really important to speak up about it. As awkward as it may be to say, I really don't know, or I really don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes we save ourselves a lot of headache by just fessing up early on and not trying to basically swallow our pride. Yeah. So what I've actually found in my experience is that trying to avoid certain failures and certain, admitting that I don't know something trying to cover it up often leads to the very fear and the sense of incompetence that we're trying to avoid. It's like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Yes. So now I'm much more aware of my fears, and I have to be careful. In my lifetime, I've had a great many of my greatest fears come to pass, so that I could grow and could move past them.
Wow.
So this is what I always tell my clients: is whatever fears you have, be careful, because you might just get them. Because once you face your fears, there's nothing left to fear after that.
Right.
So it really sets you free. But if you can really keep your fears in check early on, it saves you an awful lot of headache.
Right.
If I can, I'll share just a really neat experience that I had with someone recently who is a rock climber.
I'd love to hear it. Yes.
Just briefly, this was really fascinating. It just gave me another powerful illustration that this guy is ex-military, and one of the ways in coming back as a civilian to kind of keep a little bit of adrenaline in his life is he's taken up rock climbing. And what he tells me is he climbs, scales walls and mountains that are thousands of feet high. And so when he's climbing up and he puts his piece of gear into a rock or into a crack, he actually finds that if he's questioning whether the gear is going to hold or if the rock is going to hold his gear, if he really starts to doubt it, he will purposely pull the gear from the wall. He'll actually force it to fail.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Where he will actually yank as hard as he can, and sometimes he may drop down 20 feet down the wall. But if he needs to scale higher, he doesn't scale higher until he knows with certainty that gear is going to hold. So if he's questioning or doubting that it's going to fail, he'll purposely fail it.
Wow.
So that he can ascend higher. And I thought that was really incredible. To be a few thousand feet up on a wall and causing yourself to fall anywhere from 10 to 50 feet.
It's amazing, I'm listening to this story and the whole mindset to test whatever is happening and to welcome and embrace failure so that you can move beyond where you are is really what that whole analogy says to me. And that is amazing that he does that physically, but that is also a lesson that we could always learn is to test it as we are climbing in life, as we are moving forward in life, to test those failures, to make them test us so that we can get beyond it and move forward. Thank you for sharing that. That was great.
Yeah, most definitely. You said that beautifully. Beautiful summary.
Yes, thank you. And so here's the last question as we wrap up the conversation on failure. And honestly, Bryan, I think we could talk for a good 45 minutes, but I like to I like to make these digestible for everyone. But the last question is, what would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would actually realize that it really isn't possible to fail in a sense. The idea of failing is simply, by definition, is that something is proving unsuccessful. And it's okay if we're unsuccessful, but just by putting in effort, we are successful.
Right.
So it really, for me, I feel like the emphasis should be on the process of putting in effort, the process of learning and growing and overcoming those fears, rather than just focusing on the outcomes.
Right.
So the idea of failure is that if I'm afraid of failure, then I'm honestly focused. I have some specific outcome in mind, and God forbid I don't meet it. It could be the end. So I guess by definition, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Well, I'd just be doing so much more. I'd be doing more and more effort.
Yeah.
And the hell with the outcomes. I often say effort is up to us, and perhaps results are up to God.
Yes, I love that. It's kind of that. It's one of my mantras, especially going through life, that we're so focused on landmarks, benchmarks, what we have to get to.
Yes.
Sometimes it is, as famous quote says, sometimes it is about the journey and not the destination.
Most definitely.
So sometimes it is about that whole process, and if we dare ourselves to really focus on the journey, then that will lead to a very promising life.
Exactly.
Yes.
And if I can maybe share one more thought on that.
Yes.
So with failure, let's say we do feel like we've failed and really let ourselves down. Often with that comes pain. It's painful to fail, especially if it's something that we've tied up our identity in.
Yeah.
But often with pain is usually the harbinger of conviction. When we've been through a lot, it strengthens our convictions that things we will do and won't do in the future.
Yeah.
And those convictions actually lead to a definiteness of purpose that obviously create passion and a greater confidence. So it's ironic that failure itself, wound up in failure itself, is the seed of greater confidence and passion.
Wow. Failure itself is the seed of greater confidence and passion. Wow. That's really good. That's really good. I'm just thinking about that a little bit. I'm kind of digesting it. That's really good. That is going to go on when I introduce this video, that's going to go in the Facebook status. That's really good.
Awesome.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much. I mean, even though we weren't able to do a video, this conversation that we had, I really do feel is going to make an impact to those people who are stuck or who are not embracing their mistakes as though they should, or maybe even the people who are focused so much on the destination that they are forgetting to learn and embrace the journey. I think it's going to make a definite impact on them. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom.
Bounty. It's my bounty, James.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, wonderful. Have a great afternoon, and I look forward to being in touch.
All right. Talk to you soon.
You got it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.